Jack Milton. I'm the VP Geology with Fireweed Metals, and I'm going to run through a presentation that I recently made at the Yukon Geoscience Forum. It's entitled The Critical Minerals Epicentre of Yukon, focused at Mactung and Macpass. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the Mactung and Macpass projects are located on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Kaska Nation, the First Nation of Natchoonayak-Dun, and the Satu settlement area for Mactung. I will be making some forward-looking statements during this presentation that should not be unduly relied upon. So Fireweed Metals is a Canadian junior mining company, and we focus on developing and exploring critical minerals projects through progressive leadership, innovation, and collaboration. Our main projects are at Macpass and Mactung on the eastern side of Yukon, near the border with NWT. And we also have another project, Gaina, located in NWT. And this presentation is going to focus just on Macpass and Mactung. I'm going to outline why I think that Macpass and Mactung is the critical minerals epicenter of Yukon. We have zinc deposits there, tungsten deposits, and perhaps gallium and germanium occurrences. I'm going to run through what we did this year at Mactung, through our resource update and a bit of geology. And then we're going to look at some geology at Tom and Jason, and then boundary zone, and then what's next for Fireweed, and perhaps what's next for Yukon. So why zinc? Why is zinc critical? Zinc has many applications. Its primary application is in galvanizing, but it's used significantly in renewable energy for constructing, manufacturing wind turbines. It's used in transportation, in energy storage, and infrastructure. And about a third of the world's zinc is produced in China, which is one of the reasons that makes it a critical metal due to that supply risk. What about tungsten? Tungsten, on the other hand, almost 85% of the world's tungsten comes from China, with a small amount from Russia, and the rest in these Western countries that are shown on this slide. And it's the unique properties of tungsten that make it critical. There's very few things that can substitute for this due to its very high melting point, its high density, and its very high hardness as well. It's used in manufacturing automotives, in aerospace, and particularly in defense. It's used in diamond drilling and cutting equipment, and in many electrical and electronics appliances. So what about germanium and gallium? These are a semi-metal. Germanium and gallium are metal, and they're both used in solar cells and electronics. Germanium is used in fiber optics. It's used in the manufacturing of polymers. And due to its transparency to infrared light, it's used in infrared optics, such as night vision, and in many military guidance and weapon sighting systems. Gallium, on the other hand, is used a lot in semiconductor manufacturing. It's used in integrated circuits. It's used in laser diodes. For example, when you look at your iPhone and it looks at your face and detects that, that's gallium. It's used in LEDs and photodetectors and telecommunications. It's also used in defense. And for this reason, China banned the export of both germanium and gallium this year in 2023. And there's no government stockpiles of either of these critical minerals. Now we're going to take a look at our Macpass and Mactung projects on the map. This is where we sit. There is the Canal Road, which is government-maintained highway that goes between the Tom and Jason deposits. And there is an airstrip located near the Tom deposit. It's almost 1,000 square kilometers of ground that we cover. And we're going to go around this map and look at all these deposits in detail. So Mactung. This is the resource that we put out at Mactung earlier this year. And this resource solidified Mactung as the world's largest high-grade tungsten deposit. In that resource, there's over 41 million tons of indicated resource between the underground and open pit constrained material at a grade of 0.73 tungstate. And in the inferred, we have over 12 million tons of 0.59% tungstate. And it's all hosted by scheelite, calcium tungstate, in a calcic skarn. So these are skarn layers within a sequence of sedimentary rocks where the limestones have been replaced by skarn minerals. We have the upper and the lower zones shown on this cross-section, and the upper zone is largely constrained by the conceptual open pit, whereas the lower zone would be constrained by underground mining. It's slightly higher grade and very extensive. It's very thick in the lower zone. It's up to about 60 meters true thickness. Its thickest part, and it shows very good grade continuity. So from Mactung, we go about 10 kilometers to the south to the Tom and Jason deposits. These are 5 kilometers apart. And in 2018, we put out a resource on Tom and Jason of over 11 million tons of indicated and almost 40 million tons of inferred material, both at a grade of approximately 10% zinc equivalent, where most of that is in zinc with a bit of lead and a bit of silver. And that solidified Tom and Jason as the largest zinc deposits owned by the junior mining company. So what does the resource look like at Tom? Here we can see the different fascies that we will use to constrain the resource in our upcoming resource update. These fascies go from feeder proximal to feeder distal styles of mineralization. So on the left here, you see the massive sulfides. These are laminated to massive. They're very galena and silver rich, so lead and silver rich. And they form very close to the feeder, these zones of very high grade massive sulfide. And these transition laterally and upwards into the pink fascies, which is named due to the pink color of sphalerite in those laminated rocks. And this zones out to the gray fascies, where the sphalerite becomes lighter colored and you get more barite. It's very dense. And finally into the black fascies, which is slightly higher grade in general than the gray fascies, but very light, sort of cream to white colored sphalerite. And we use these transitions to infer how close we are to the feeder to aid in our exploration. So now from Tom and Jason, we go past End Zone. End Zone is a high-grade near-surface feeder-style mineralization that we drilled in 2018, but we do not yet have a current mineral resource, but it will be included in our forthcoming update. From here, we go to Boundary Zone. It's 12 kilometers on from End Zone, and this is where we have focused much of our exploration within the last few years. We drilled 22,500 meters this year, and about 70% of that was at Boundary Zone. This long section through Boundary Zone shows what we put out at the start of the field season before we started drilling this year. And what we see on the left-hand side of this section is one of our holes, hole 2 from 2022, which was our best hole ever in terms of intersected grade thickness. That was over 100 meters of over 14% zinc. And that makes that hole perhaps one of the best holes in terms of grade thickness drilled at any zinc project globally in perhaps the last decade for an exploration project that's not a mine or not in construction. And on the other side of this long section, it's our second best hole ever. It intersected almost 300 meters of 4.5% zinc, including some significantly higher grade stratiform sections. And all the geological indicators were pointing towards what we interpreted as an untested potential feeder zone. The grades were getting hotter with depth. We were getting more lead, more silver, and the color of the sphalerite was tending towards those warmer colors, which indicates we're heading towards the feeder. We also saw increases in elements like copper, not to economically interesting levels, but geochemically anomalous, that are pointing towards this untested feeder zone. So that rectangle in the middle there, we're going to see on the next slide. And you can see that rectangle on this updated long section that reflects all the drilling that we've done this year. And the colors on that section represent true thickness of a stratiform to laminated massive sulfide zone that forms a continuous link between what we used to call boundary west and boundary main. And we now refer to it all as boundary zone. And we successfully linked these two zones by drilling this year. And the grades seem to increase with depth, and the true thickness also increases. So in that section, the hottest colors that you can see are over 40 meters true thickness, and those thin towards the edges. But there's a strike length of about 550 meters demonstrated now within just the stratiform laminated zone, and a depth extent of over 450 meters. Within this zone, we drilled hole 7 this year, and this eclipsed our previous best hole ever and took the crown. So now we have 82.5 meters of almost 12% zinc, 2.2% lead, and 81.2 grams per ton silver. In addition to another intersection of 118 meters of over 15% zinc, 2.8% lead, and 85.8 grams per ton silver. And there's an argument that this could be the best hole, if not, one of the best holes drilled in Yukon, perhaps in any commodity, depending on how you interpret it. And surrounding this zone of stratiform and laminated mineralization is a halo of stockwork vein and breccia mineralization that extends for about 100 to 150 meters on either side of this laminated stratiform zone. And now we're going to take a look and see what some of those rocks look like. So here's the massive sulfide that we see at boundary zone. It's almost 100% sulfide, pyrite, sphalerite, and galena. And this trends out laterally into the pink fascies, which we intersected at boundary zone this year for the first time, indicating that we're at or around the feeder zone. And it's this laminated pink sphalerite interbedded with this carbonaceous black mudstone. And distal to that, we see the black fascies. So again, gray-colored sphalerite in this laminated mudstone. But note that in the pink fascies, we can see veins that cross-cut the early stratiform lamination with coarse pyrite and sphalerite mineralization. And this is this vein style and breccia style of mineralization that overprints the stratiform mineralization. What do these breccias look like? These are a few images. All of these are from core scans that we scanned all of our core with high resolution imagery. And they are explosive jigsaw fit hydrothermal breccias that are infilled by sphalerite and siderite and pyrite. And the breccias seem to be developing along stylolite planes. So these are high angles to bedding stylolites, so they developed during our genesis. And these breccias post-date them. And sometimes within these breccias, you'll see clasts that contain stylolites showing that the breccias are post-stylolite. So these are quite late, potentially as late as Cretaceous and Cordilleran deformation. And this is what some of the veins look like. So here we see these very sort of brick red sphalerite veins, banded veins of sphalerite and pyrite and siderite, again, coming in along stylolites. And in places we see these veins folded into synform antifold pairs. So they are likely forming post-stylolite but pre-folding and main foliation development and sort of syn orogenic veining. And on the right, we see flooding through coarse clastic rocks. So orange sphalerite flooded through the matrix of these conglomerates. And on the right, selective replacement of specific clasts within mud-rich diamictites, where some of the clasts are completely taken out by this brick red sphalerite. And this is what some of the veins look like at boundary zone. So again, red to sort of tan-colored sphalerite, cross-cutting bedding at a high angle and being folded. Cutting both the mudstones here, the volcaniclastics, and some very thin pink sphalerite veins on the right there, through mudstone, and they seem to be forming this randomly oriented stockwork of veins. And this is going to run through what these things look like in 3D. So here we see that long section that we just looked at, and coming onto the screen right now, we see our interpretation of what that stratiform zone, the laminated to massive sulfide stratiform zone, looks like in 3D. And surrounding that in the drill holes is selected any zinc assay that's over 1% zinc for any of the holes that we've released so far. So there's still about 20-something holes remaining at boundary zone to be released. And you can see that it forms this envelope or this halo surrounding the laminated stratiform zone. And that is that vein and that breccia mineralization outside. So switching gears slightly, germanium and gallium. So what's the significance of this? Well, in some of the preliminary network that we've done at boundary zone, we've run full element assays on the zinc concentrates produced and noticed very high levels of germanium and gallium in these 85 to 285 ppm germanium and 17 to 56 ppm gallium. So if these were to be included within our upcoming resource update, it could potentially make this a very significant resource of germanium and gallium. So back to boundary zone, we drilled 40 holes in 2023. We have assay results pending for about 24 holes. And boundary remains open in several directions. We're still not done with the exploration there. We can step out and try and hit some targets in that vein breccia mineralization, in addition to the stratiform laminated mineralization. And we believe that there's significant resource potential at boundary zone. We've now drilled over 32,000 meters in almost 100 holes at boundary, and we anticipate putting out an inaugural resource in 2024. In 2023, we drilled 40 holes at boundary, and we have assay results pending for 24 of those holes. Boundary is open in several directions. We're not done with the exploration there yet. We can step out the vein of breccia mineralization, and there's also potential to drill step out holes on the stratiform laminated high-grade massive sulfide zone. We've now drilled about 32,000 meters at boundary zone in almost 100 holes, and we believe there's significant potential for a large resource at boundary zone. And we anticipate putting out our inaugural resource in 2024. Back to the bigger picture of the property, almost 1,000 square kilometers in prime area of the Selwyn Basin, one of the most prolific zinc districts on Earth. Between Tom and Jason, we have zinc resources that we've established and will be updating alongside the inaugural boundary zone resource. We have end zone, boundary zone, but also an enormous amount of blue sky potential. And these deposits tend to form within the Selwyn Basin in this district along this northwest-southeast trend. You see the same thing at Howard's Pass. We see it in the Anvil mining district around Thero. And we are going to focus more in 2024 on doing some generative or early stage exploration in that area of blue sky potential. So if we take those different things and look at them in turn, we have boundary zone coming up, our inaugural resource. We have Tom and Jason, which is already one of the world's largest undeveloped zinc deposits. And we have Mactung, which is the largest high-grade tungsten deposit in the world. So I hope this outlines why, Macpass has the potential to be the critical minerals epicenter for Yukon. Zinc, tungsten, and potentially the byproduct metals like gallium, germanium, and even copper. There's a small amount of copper we included in the resource update at Mactung. So what's next for Fireweed? Well, our drill results are not all out for 2023. We'll be putting those out in the coming weeks as the assays come in. We're putting in a resource update for boundary zone, end zone, and Tom and Jason. and we'd anticipate a large drill program again in 2024. So Macpass, really, between zinc, tungsten, germanium, and gallium, I think the development of these projects provides a pathway to secure a large part of Canada's critical minerals future. So thank you everyone for listening. Jack Milton, VP Geology with Fireweed. My email's up on the screen, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at that email address. So thanks everyone for your time.